This is BIA, Becoming in Action, a space to explore the lifelong journey of growth as leaders, as professionals, and as human beings. Through honest conversations and lived experience, we evolve with courage and intention. Here's your host, Sandy Abear.
Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. Today's conversation is with one of my oldest and dearest friends, Sarah. We met almost 30 years ago in graduate school, studying psychology, and over the decades, I have watched her reinvent herself more than once with so much courage, humility, and honesty. Sarah's path has not been linear. She started in psychology, pivoted to law, became an attorney, stepped away from her career to raise 3 children, and then in her 40s made the decision to return to school and become a therapist. What I love about this conversation is that it is really about identity, about the pressure to meet expectations, about motherhood, marriage, and friendship, about the ways we lose ourselves and find ourselves again over time. It is also about something I think many of us wrestle with quietly. What happens when the life that looks successful on the outside does not fully feel like you on the inside? Sarah is wise, deeply thoughtful, funny, grounded, and one of the safest people I know. I think so many people, especially women, are going to hear parts of themselves in her story. Let's begin. Today, we have a really special treat. My friend Sarah flew in yesterday, very late, to visit from Kansas City with her husband, Jay, and she agreed to join me in the podcast room today. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi, Sandy.
I am so excited to have this conversation. Sarah and I have been friends since 1995.
Wow.
Yeah. We met at Kansas State. I was in the PhD program for IO psychology, and Sarah was in her last semester of the master's program. And we instantly became friends.
Yes.
Just so similar
Yes.
in so many ways.
You're my twin.
Yes, that is so true. You have to tell that story.
Well, when I was little, I had an imaginary twin whose name was Sandy. And so then I met her and Sandy.
So funny. Had you met a Sandy prior to that?
No.
That is wild. And we got really close really quickly because I was living in Topeka. Sarah was living in Lawrence.
Mm-hmm.
She had gotten engaged and was living in Lawrence because Jay was in law school at KU.
Yes.
And Sarah would drive to Topeka, and then from Topeka, we would drive to Manhattan, Kansas.
Yes.
3-4 days a week, something like that. On Fridays, I went with Dr. Friedman and his crew. You finished up your IO master's program, but immediately decided to take kind of a left turn.
Yes.
Tell us about it.
So after I finished the program, I decided to go to law school. My fiance at the time, husband, was in law school. And I was like, I can totally do that. And it was, if I'm speaking honestly, I think a lot of it was I wanted to impress my parents. My parents were so impressed with him and what he was doing. And my parents had always discouraged me from going into psychology. I think partly because that's what my dad was in. And they would just say, you can't make any money in psychology. You shouldn't do this as a career. And so I thought, well, they're so impressed with Jay. I can do this too. So why don't I go to law school?
So many questions. First, why would they discourage you from psychology? That's what your dad did.
I know. Yeah.
And he made a good, I mean, you guys had a good life.
I know. I don't know. I think they were trying to be protective, but just, it was really bad advice.
Yes, because psychology is a great field.
Yeah, I love it.
Yes. Interesting. Jay is impressive, but not because he went to law school. He's just a great guy.
He is. Yeah.
Jay was a 3 when you started as a 1L.
Correct.
And tell us about what that law school experience was like.
Gosh, that was a long time ago. It is a different animal. Like I think at first for me, just the realization there's just not support like you get in other programs. You're kind of on your own. You got to figure it out on your own and do whatever you need to get done. And then the other thing that's interesting about law school, at least at KU, you are graded on your final and you have class participation, but there's like nothing else all semester. So that puts just so much weight on the final exam. And back in the day, our finals were paper pencil. So we had these little blue book binders that we had to write the answers to, and your hand would cramp up. And for 3 hours, you would just be writing, 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 writing. And then those poor people that had to grade that, I don't even know how they did that, but it just had that inherent pressure. And the other piece of it is some professors did what was called a rolling boulder, which was good because then you knew when you were going to be up in class. So you could really prepare and read the case law and kind of know all the arguments and understand so you could respond in class. Other professors did what was called lightning strike. They would just grab a person randomly. So you never knew when you were going to be up. So then you had to be prepared every single class. But yeah, lots of stress in law school.
Well, and let's be honest, there was a lot of stress in your master's program too.
Fair.
It was no joke.
Yeah.
I mean, we had lightning strike types of things as well, smaller group and less competition.
True.
But still a lot of pressure. And to finish your master's program, you had oral exams.
Yes.
Which were crazy hard.
Yes.
This is what's interesting for me because I know how stressful that program was. And if you're saying law school's more, like I can't even imagine.
Right. Yeah. It was just stressful in a different way. And I think in the master's program, we had all those presentations we had to do and group projects and all of that. And in law school, you just didn't have any of that. It was just all the fun. In law school, they rank you. First semester, you're ranked and you know exactly where you stand amongst your peers. And you know that local firms look for the top, 10%. Those are the people they're going to hire. And just so there's just so much jockeying and competition.
And I think you had even told me, like, when you're researching for a paper or studying for finals, that people would hide stuff.
Right. Occasionally, they would hide resources so other people couldn't find it. And this was pre-internet search. I mean, we had some, but it was rough.
I still remember Cyclit, where you had to go to the computer in the library where you could search the journals and you had to sign up and have time. And then you'd had to find the citation and then go find the journal. And if the book wasn't there,
right,
which that's how you could hide. I mean, just put it anywhere in the library that's not on the shelf where it belongs. Yeah. No one else can get to it, which I did not ever experience that in the psych program, but I'm imagining it's the same thing.
Right.
And it's so different.
Yes. Oh, you can find everything online.
I know.
Yeah.
Which is wild. Like, how easy would that have been?
Would have been great.
You were always very accomplished academically, very good grades, very, very smart. And law school was a different kind of challenge.
Yes.
How did you handle now being in a cohort that everyone is super high level, you're being ranked, and it's just like you said, it's a different animal.
I think the hardest part of it is the messing with your mind, that mental challenge. People would use that to their advantage sometimes. I'll never forget, it was our first day of law school. We were doing orientation and we're lined up for something and waiting in line. And I was chatting with some guy in line with me, and he told me that his expectation was to be Order of the Coif, which is high ranking as you graduate. And I said, well, my guess is everybody's hoping for that. And his response was, well, I'm right between above average and the G word. And it's like, oh, okay. Just the boldness of that, and wasn't how I was used to interacting with people. It was just interesting.
Well, and law school isn't just about being smart. It's a very specific type of application of knowledge. It's very unique.
Correct. Actually, that is so true. And there's an interesting overlap, I think, between law and what I do now, in terms of you have to understand little bits of information, how those little bits of information interact with each other and how they might interact with each other in unique ways in different situations, and apply all of that. And so I think there's some similarity to that in counseling, which is what I do now.
That is fascinating. I would never have equated those things being so similar.
Yeah, they are.
Wow.
In fact, just a couple weeks ago, we were visiting my son in Chicago and playing this game called the Turing game. And it's based off of the guy who created computers. It's basically a logic game. And so you're code cracking in this game. One or two questions in, my son Jack and I would know the answer immediately. And my poor husband is struggling. It took round after round of this game for him to figure out what was actually happening and going on. And finally I turned to him like, how are you a lawyer? And then I felt bad because he's a fantastic lawyer and he's so, so smart. And I think that's the piece that I apply as a counselor, as a therapist, is that code cracking piece.
That is fascinating too, because Jay graduated very top of his class.
Number two.
Number 2.
Mm-hmm.
Our brains are all just wired so differently. And there's so many different ways to be smart and apply your knowledge, skills, and abilities. But it's hard when you get into a situation where you start to feel a little less than, especially when it was an arena that you always have excelled. In the classroom, you always excelled.
Yeah. Yeah. Finding yourself not at the top of the class. I think I graduated the top third of my law school class, which is great, but not in the law profession. I mean, it's okay.
And probably not in your mind either.
Yeah.
You're a little competitive. You may not know this about yourself.
I've been told that before.
Sarah's very competitive. It's very fun, but you are competitive, mostly with yourself. You have very high expectations. So I was impressed at the time even, and even more impressed now, that you did not let that stop you. You were not at the very top. Felt uncomfortable. You did not give up. You did it anyway.
Right. Yeah.
Did you ever contemplate quitting?
Never. I don't know. I don't know why that never even occurred to me. I knew I could do it, and so I was just going to do it.
And you did.
I did. And let me say, not everybody in law school was a jerk. We have very lovely people that were very supportive and caring. And so it made it bearable for sure.
It's a normal curve on everything. Any situation you get into, you're going to have people on either tail and most in the middle.
Correct. While I was in law school, I started clerking for a local attorney. It was just sort of a friend situation. I met him and fell into working for him part-time. He was a great, great guy. We're still friends to this day. But I was like, I don't know that I really wanted to do that. I really was interested in doing employment law, blending the IO psychology and law, and I just couldn't get into that field. I applied and nothing really stuck job-wise, couldn't find anything. I was applying to those positions and then I was applying to some IO positions, thinking like, I'm just going to hedge my bets here and get a job. I was offered a position using my IO degree at Sprint. It was called the University of Excellence at the time. It was internal training and assessing departments in terms of what they could do to improve and things. So I was like, okay, I'll do IO. I can do this. I can flex back. And so started working at Sprint and just realized early on that it probably wasn't the best fit for me. There was not a lot of work at the time for our group. There was a lot of downtime and I like being busy. I like having things to do. And so my former boss that I clerked for would call me every now and then. He knew I was struggling. He would just go tick, 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 like indicating you're just listening to the clock. And I was like, Jim, you're awful. And so long story short, I ended up going back and working for Jim. I worked for him for, another probably 7-8 years. It was a small firm. It was him and I in a building with other attorneys. It was personal injury and workers' comp plaintiffs work. We are the little guy. Loved working for him. Loved the research and writing part. I would write all his briefs for him for the appellate court for work comp appeals and things like that. But something about it never really felt like it scratched the itch. I didn't really feel like it was my calling. I was good at it, but it didn't really feel like me. And so then, 3 kids in 5 years into it, my husband's an attorney, I'm an attorney, and a kid would get the sniffles and we would start our debate as attorneys too. Like, okay, well, I have this and this tomorrow. Well, I have this and this tomorrow. Who's going to stay home with the kids? And it just got to be a lot. And finally decided that I would step away from work for a season and stay home with our kids.
How old were the kids when you did that?
Oh gosh, Jack had just finished kindergarten. So he was 5, Ryan was 3, and then Noah was a baby.
You had your hands full.
Yes.
That reinvention from lawyer to stay-at-home mom, what was that like?
Yeah, I liked it more than I thought I would. I was worried I would be bored and just like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? I really enjoyed having time with our kids when they were little and just doing the different things. In fact, when I first started staying at home, we had our kids on a little bit of a rotation in daycare. So, like, one went these 2 days, one went these 2 days, and then the baby was home. So, I would have a little bit alone time with each of the older kids while the baby was napping and things like that. So, it was just fun.
That's so smart.
I was lucky that we could do that. Then my kids got to spend more time with my mom than they probably would have because I was around and I could take them over. They used to have Grammy days once a week and spend some time
Oh,
with her. It was really good for everybody.
3 kids in such a short period of time, and now they're all grown. Your youngest just turned 21. What did you learn from motherhood?
Ugh, humility. I would have to say, you think you figured it out, especially coming from like you're in high performing careers and you just have this expectation of being competent at most things. And then getting these kids that just really, in some ways, challenge you in ways you never expected to be challenged. And just realizing like, it's okay. I don't have all the answers. It's okay to apologize and admit I made a mistake and ask for forgiveness.
And you have 3 very different children that have each uniquely challenged you.
Yes. Yes.
What's been the hardest part?
My kids were super smart. And
They are.
I think my oldest was about 2, maybe 3, when I realized he was smarter than I was. He was playing with his little kitchen set. He was stirring a pot and he had a sippy cup full of milk. And I could just see his little wheels turning. He's like, oh, yeah, I'm going to just totally pour my milk in here and use it as part of my game here. And I looked at him. I said, Jack, don't you open that up and pour that milk in that pot. And he looked at me, looked at the milk, and he sucked in a bunch of milk and then spit it into the pot. I was like, this kid is smarter than I am. I just need to keep my bluff in long enough to make sure he's a decent person, you know?
He found a loophole in the instructions.
He did. He did.
Oh, that's
It was so
hilarious.
funny.
What's been the greatest joy of raising these kids?
I think the thing that has been most unexpectedly fun for me as a mom is I've loved every season. I'm a baby person. I love babies. I love taking care of babies. And so I thought, man, once they become toddlers, I'm going to really be sad and not have the baby. And then toddlers were so fun. And then I thought, oh, once they get to school, I'm going to miss. And then just every season has just brought its own joy. It's just been fascinating to watch them develop into people and learn about who they are and learn to be okay with who they are in the world and show up authentically, hopefully.
Your motherhood has been beautiful to watch. You are so supportive as a mom. And sometimes that means dishing out the tough love. You probably are better at it than I am.
Oh, I would say the opposite. I think
really?
you're better at it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I feel like I really admire that about you.
Oh my gosh. I think you're a way better mom than I am.
Oh, no. We can have that fight later, but your kids are amazing. They are very different. They've gone in very different directions. And your ability to continue to pivot and show up the way they need you to is such a hard thing to do because letting go of those expectations.
I think the hardest expectation for me to let go was education. And so I grew up in a household that education was everything. You have to go to college, you have to do this. And I personally have 3 postgraduate degrees. Education is a big thing. And when my youngest was struggling first semester in college and just really hating life and hating themselves, I had to let go of that expectation that all my kids would be college graduates and let them be who they are. And yeah, that was hard. And also, it's been so good for our relationship for me to realize that was a me thing and it didn't have to be a them thing.
We all feel most loved when we can be ourselves and it's okay. What a great gift for both of you guys.
Thanks.
How long did you stay at home?
Wow. I stayed at home until my youngest was in 2nd grade. Once they were in 2nd grade, I started thinking, man, I feel like it's time for me to do something else. Like, I feel like the kids don't need me as much. They're involved in their own things. I felt myself getting kind of depressed, just feeling like I had a lack of purpose. And so I went to Jay, my husband, and we talked about it. I'll always appreciate this. He's an amazing guy, but this was like, oh my gosh. He was just like, you know what? You've always wanted to do psychology. You didn't do it before. Why don't you go back in school and do it now? None of our kids are going to be in college soon. They were all in middle school, elementary. You can get in, you can get out, and then we can deal with their college. Go back and do what you really wanted to do.
So it was his idea,
He was so supportive. He was so supportive.
but he brought it up first.
I think I was hemming and hawing, and he
Okay.
was just like, yes, that you need to do this. Yeah.
Oh.
It was so sweet.
It is so sweet.
And so then that started the process. I always wanted to do psychology. I always wanted to do therapy, like be a counselor or a psychologist. And so I looked into local programs of what I could do, marriage, couple, family, MFT, counseling, social work. So I looked at all those programs. I applied to all those programs. I got into all those programs. And then I had to decide which route did I want to go. And I decided to do counseling. The program had just expanded to 3 years. And I thought that might be better for me to balance home life if it was a little bit of a slower pace, so I could still be there for my kids. That's the route I took, and it was a great choice for me. And I'll never forget when we told our kids that I was going to go back to school, our youngest just started crying. And I go, did you expect me to sit home and wait for you at school all day just to wait for you to come back at the end of the day? They were like, yes.
It's their world. We're just living in it, right?
I have been told that I am like not the main character. I'm just a supporting role.
Which you're not giving supporting character energy. You are main character, for sure. How daunting did it feel to go back to school?
At the time, I was in my 40s. And so it's like, gosh, am I really going to do this again? There's a level of vulnerability and humility to be in this place of like, I don't know this stuff, but I want to know it. You know this better than I do. The professors who are probably younger than me in some cases, and definitely my peers in my classes, there was an element of, am I going to let that stop me from doing what I want to do? And it's like, no, I'm not going to let that stop me.
Never let anything stop you.
Well, I don't know about that, but
When you put your mind to it.
fair. I think there's something about that, about telling yourself you can do something.
Absolutely.
Our brains want to prove us right. So if we tell our brain we can, we can. If we tell our brain we can't, we can't. Occasionally there's other things, hurdles and things, but yeah.
The biggest hurdle is our point of view and our mindset. There can be other hurdles, but that's usually the biggest one. What was the most unexpected part of the program?
I didn't expect it to be harder than law school.
It was harder than law school?
In a different way.
Okay.
Because in law school, you have all that pressure to learn all this stuff in the final. And in graduate school, especially a counseling graduate program, there's an intentional part of it that they basically kind of break you down to build you back up. So you're doing tons of personal work. That is the hard part. You've got the classwork, you've got to be doing the readings, you've got tests, you've got quizzes, you've got presentations you have to do, you have projects, all of that. Then you have practicum and internship. All of that is hard. And also in the midst of all of that, you're having to examine your own family of origin and how that's impacted you, where your soft spots are, where your blind spots are. How do you navigate around that? How can you be as healthy as you can be so that you can sit with clients well? There's a requirement of getting your own therapy while you're doing the program, which is so smart, but it's a very intense season of deconstruction, reconstruction.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you hit your practicum and internship year and a half, it's like you have 3 jobs all of a sudden. Because at the time I was stay-at-home mom and managing the household, and God love Jay, he stepped it up and did a lot of that, took on a lot of that for me, which was so helpful. And then you had your classwork that you had to focus on and all the reading and all of that. And then you have these people that are trusting you to care for them, and you don't really know 100% what you're doing. You get tons and tons of supervision, which is so great. But then you're also being vulnerable day after day because you're recording yourself doing something you've never done before and you want to do it well. And then you have these experts, your supervisors, watching this video and pausing and critiquing and pausing and critiquing. And you're just like, ugh. It's just, there's a lot to it emotionally. Now I'm in the position where I get to supervise interns as they go through this process. That's one of the funnest things about my job, helping develop a new counselor and getting their feet under them as they do this work. And I tell them it's like you're going through a tunnel and your world needs to shrink so that you have the time and energy to focus. It's hard to hold other people's hard things and to hold it well and to not let it destroy you. So you really need the bandwidth for that. So if there's extra in your life that you can cut out for a season, you need to consider that. When I was in grad school, I was on the praise team at church and I was the children's choir director at church. And I was doing all these extra things that I'm like, I can't. I don't have the bandwidth. I don't have the ability to do this. I'm working like 10, 12-hour days between my 2 internship sites and all the things, all these people I'm carrying and caring for. Yeah, it's just like you're walking through a tunnel and you don't get to see your friends as much. So you don't get the support that maybe you need during this time, but you just don't have the bandwidth for it. You just don't have the time and energy. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. After a year and a half, you'll be getting out of this and you can re-engage in your life. And it takes good friends that can understand that and can take what you can give them through that process. Before I started, I created a binder for meals. My husband thought I was insane.
I remember this.
So I had 4 months worth of meal planning. I had a calendar for each month. Here's the meals we're going to have this month. I had the recipes. I had shopping lists for each week. We just worked our way through that binder. Every 4 months, we'd start it over again. And for that year and a half, just to get through that time. At first, he made fun of me. And then he was like, I am so glad you did this. This was a lifesaver.
It's like HelloFresh before there was one.
Right.
Take the mental load off of deciding.
Right.
You've always been super organized that way. Your budgeting. I'll never forget. I was 23 when I met you. I had not really been introduced to the concept of budget, particularly not at the level that you budgeted.
Oh, that's a Jay Donnelly thing.
Oh, that was Jay.
Oh my gosh. He is so meticulous with money. I don't know if you noticed it at the time. Like, I don't know. We usually try to hide it before people come over. But...
Oh, no, on the fridge.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
You
Oh, yeah.
noticed.
I noticed. And I was intrigued.
So we have this chart on our fridge with the different categories and you write in every time you spend money. And so you know, like you have the total at the top and you watch the money disappear as you go through the month.
And your categories and your slush fund. And it was amazing.
Right. And, we're in a decent place for retirement at some point when that time comes. And Jay gets all the credit for that. I was so resistant of keeping track of money, especially to that degree. Like seriously, every time you spend money, you have to enter it into Quicken. So like I go to CVS and I get a candy bar and some medicine. I have to enter that into Quicken.
To this day.
To this day. And so that is tedious. And it also pays off.
It does.
Yeah.
You guys have been very intentional about many things. Money is just one of them.
Fair. I would say we went to couples counseling a while back and our couples counselor told us that we need to write a book on empty nesting. She's like, you're doing such a good job of this. And I'm like, what? No, we're just doing the thing. But I do think we started when our youngest, was just going into high school, maybe even was still in middle school, with this realization of like, we need to have things in our life that are us things because the kid things are going to be dwindling in the next few years. And my husband was a scout dad. He went camping with the kids up for the Boy Scouts and loved it. So he asked me, so who's going to camp with me once they're all graduated and out of scouts? And I go, I don't know. And he goes, well, would you go if we had a camper? And I'm like, I don't know. He does research and he brings me this picture of this pull behind camper. And it's a little teardrop. It was so cute and adorable. Basically a mattress on wheels that you would connect to the back of your car. I took one look at it and I go, where's the bathroom? And he goes, okay, I'll be back. So he does more research and he finds this next cute little camper that's a little bit bigger and it has a bathroom and it has air conditioning and a little kitchenette. And I was like, maybe we could do that. So he starts negotiating all these rules of camping. You won't have to cook a thing. I'll take care of all the food when we camp. And you won't have to clean it at all. I'll clean it. It's not going to be any more work for you, which was so, so sweet. And the other negotiating piece was our dogs could sleep with us when we camp. Because I always wanted our dogs to sleep with us. And he was like, no, we don't need to do that. So I was like, oh, okay, maybe we'll try this camping thing. And here we are on our 3rd camper.
And it's beautiful.
It is crazy. Way bigger than our teardrop.
Way bigger.
Yeah.
It looks like a home. So interesting. Did the dogs end up sleeping in bed with you at home then?
eventually.
I kind of thought so.
Right. After Tiny passed, and Tiny was my little heart dog and
Mm-hmm.
my little Yorkie, and he was just a mess, but he was my baby and I
Yep.
was his person. He was only allowed to sleep with us on the camper and he would just cuddle up and snuggle. And after he passed, I was like, you know what? I don't like that rule. I
Yeah.
want my dog to be able to sleep with me if they want to. And we currently have 3 dogs, and just our little one is the only one that wants to sleep with us, thank goodness. And so Bear gets to sleep with us.
So you finished up school.
Yes. During my process of internship, I was interning at a counseling center that is housed in a church, which is a beautiful model. This church congregation has decided that they want to support mental health. And so they have a counseling center that allows them to offer sliding scale. In our city, there are a lot of therapists that are private pay. Not a lot of them take insurance because they can get away with that in our city. And so rates go from, 120, 150 an hour up to 220, 250 for an hourly session. And so this counseling center, the scale $20 to 80 based on household income, and it's self-reported. And so I was interning there and I just really loved that model. I feel like people who can afford it are going to get care elsewhere. People who can't afford anything, we have our county mental health that's available for them. But there's a middle group of people that don't qualify for free services. There's no way they could imagine paying for private pay. And so this little counseling center fills the gap a little bit in our little corner of the world. And so I was really passionate about that. And I really wanted to stay. I really felt like this is where I'm supposed to be. I felt a calling, like this is where I'm supposed to be. And so my supervisor at the time would just kind of smile like patronizingly to me and be like, okay, uh-huh. And then finally, as I got closer to graduation, she's like, no, really, you got to go. I don't have anything for you. You can't stay. So for the first time, I considered, oh, maybe I won't be able to stay. And having to figure out, like, okay, so what else could I do? And I decided to start a private practice. I had a group from my cohort that wanted to office share. And so we started working on that, set up a private practice, and was debating how do I incorporate a little bit of that model? Because now I have to pay rent and now I have to pay for everything of a business. I can't just do that kind of a sliding scale.
Now you understand the 150 an hour because there's so much that needs to go into it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so trying to figure that out, I did that for about 6 months. And then my former supervisor during my internship reached out to me and she said, hey, I have a full-time opening. Do you know anybody that would be interested? And I was like, what if it's me? And she's like, I was hoping you'd say that. And so that's how I ended up back at Westside. So I get to just really pour into that model of being able to help people that really want help, but just couldn't afford it any other way. And we're all licensed with the state. So it's like really good help. It's not like biblical counselor where you have a pastor that maybe took one class counseling during their stint at the seminary. It's clinical counseling. We're licensed with the state. We have a board of ethics we have to adhere to and all of the things. And so I love that. And then as a part of that work, they also invest in new counselors. So there's an internship program there. And so after I was there for a couple of years, I began to supervise interns, and that has been so much fun as well. I just love the variety. Like I'm also a registered play therapy supervisor. I get to work with kids, with couples, with individuals, and supervise. No 2 days are the same.
When you first started your counseling program, you set some goals for yourself.
Right. I don't even know where they came from. I was getting ready to start the program, and I thought to myself, I want to present at a professional conference and get a 4.0 throughout the whole program. That was my goal. I wanted to do the presentation before I graduated and have a 4.0 when I graduated. And I did.
Of course you did.
I don't even know why I wanted to present at a conference. I don't even know why.
And what conference did you present at?
It was the Kansas Counseling Association. They do an annual conference. They split the conference between school counseling and clinical counseling. I presented for the clinical counseling track on the neurobiology of how our relationships impact not only how we are in relationship with each other, but also how our brain gets impacted by that and how our brains can attune to each other and rewire and all of the things. Yeah.
Fascinating. I'd like to hear that presentation. You know me. Sure. As you look back on the arc of your career, how do you fit it all together and make it feel like it was a coherent whole?
That is a good question. So I really do feel like there are aspects of my legal training that I incorporate into my clinical work as a therapist. Things like record keeping and note writing. I'm well aware that any note I write might show up in a court someday and might be read by a judge or maybe read out loud to one of my clients, or my client might request it and want to read it. So very intentional about how we do that. Also kind of spoke into how our paperwork was written and things like that. Just like having that eye to liability and how that might impact. And even as simple as things like, there's snow and ice on the ground. Do we go remote for the day? Because the increased liability that our department brings to the church is huge. Each clinician might have up to 8 clients that day. And there's probably, 25 of us working that day. And so all those people have to come in and take the risk of walking across the icy sidewalk. Well, it's not worth the risk. Let's do it remotely today. Things like that. It's interesting how they kind of all tie together. And then the IO piece, I'm involved now in hiring and selecting interns and staff members. There's a little bit of that all woven in together. And I would say I'm so grateful for the encouragement to find the thing. I recognize how lucky I am that I really do love my work. And I feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing in the world. I recognize not everybody gets that. I'm so grateful for Jay's encouragement of that and for just whatever it is in me that was like, this is good, but not really good enough. I wanted to get to where it felt good enough.
Your tenacity in doing that, you invested a lot of time and energy into 2 other, and money. She gave me the little money sign, and money into 2 different career tracks prior to this.
Yeah.
That's a deep level of commitment and confidence to say, no, it's not it yet, and I'm finding it.
Right.
What gave you the strength to just keep pushing?
I think that there was a confidence that there was a thing. And I think that it wasn't me being confident, but I was sure that there was going to be a thing that really resonated. I wanted to be there. I wanted to show up in my life as the best version of myself. And so I wanted to keep digging until I found the thing that really felt like this is the thing.
Well, you certainly have. You do light up when you talk about it.
I do. I love my work. Yeah.
Earlier, you were talking about when I retire. Well, I won't really retire. I'll just reduce my hours.
Right. And I feel like I'm so lucky in that too, because thanks to COVID, which how often do we say that? But there's so much more flexibility in the work that I do. People are not afraid of doing telehealth sessions or seeing clinicians online. I feel like I'd be able to flex a little bit and incorporate more of a hybrid schedule so that would free my husband and I up to travel a little bit more.
And Jay's career took an interesting turn as well.
He started out in litigation with a firm. It wasn't a good fit for him. It created a lot of stress. It was so unpredictable in terms of schedule. Here we are with 2 babies in a year and a half. And he never knew if he would have to work through the weekend or have to travel somewhere and be gone for a few days and things like that. It was really hard on the family. He was getting to that place where the pressure of rainmaking was starting to hit, bringing in his own clients and not knowing even how to begin that process was stressful. When I was working for Jim, there was a lady down the hall who ran an employment agency. She heard about this job. They were looking for a corporate lawyer. She told Jim about it, my boss, and Jim told me about it. I was like, Jay might like that. And so I told Jay about it. He applied. He was one of like 80 people that applied for this job. And he said, well, I'm not really sure, but I'll go ahead and apply. Throughout the whole interview process, he's like, I wasn't really sure, but I just kept saying yes. And then he ended up getting the job. It was such a great move for him personally and professionally and for our family. Just much more regular hours, occasional late nights, occasional travel, but not like it was before. The company was so positive focused. The owners of the company were so invested in Kansas City. They would match any donations any of their employees made to any charities. They would buy out the local amusement park once a year, 2 days for all their employees to be able to bring their families to Worlds of Fun. They just did a lot of cool things that helped not just the company, but also the city. It was a really neat environment for him to be working in. And that was fantastic until it wasn't.
Like most things.
Yes. And then they were bought out by another company that's from out of town and didn't really understand. There's been a huge culture shift. In some ways, it's made it so much harder for him, which is where the camping comes in. That helps keep him sane.
Well, you guys just travel a lot in general.
We have since our youngest left. When Noah went to KU, we were just like, okay, here we go. Actually, I think we started a year before that because he was self-sufficient. And since then, it's just like the interesting thing was I was feeling a little bit isolated in our life. I felt like my friends were at different stages in their lives doing different things. And I was feeling like I didn't really have a lot going on. And so Jay and I talked about it. We were super intentional one year about deciding like, we're just going to say yes to everything this year that comes up and just see what happens. And it was such a great experiment because we had friends ask us if we wanted to get Broadway tickets for this season. So we've started doing that, and that's been fun. Every year, it's a group of 6 couples. We go to dinner together, and then we go to the shows. And then we've traveled with these people to Europe a couple times, and then our camping, we call them our camping friends, but before they were our pastor and his wife, they invited us to go camping once, and we said yes. We go camping with them so much now, and it's just so fun. It's really enriched our lives and made it feel more full. We have a lot of fun things.
You do. I listen to your schedule of travel and I'm jealous and exhausted at the same time.
And we don't have a little one now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have the 15-year-old at home, so we're a little more bound, but we're branching out. Jay and Sarah are gracious, and they've come to see us a bunch because it's hard for us to travel. But we are going to see them in November, so I'm so excited for that.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah. You and Jay have been married how many years now?
30.
30. Yeah. I was at your wedding.
Yes, you did my hair.
I did your hair.
Yeah.
Lots of ups and downs.
Right.
Because that's what marriage is.
For sure.
But you guys have such a strong friendship and such a strong sense of fun. Mm-hmm. And I love when you come to visit because you guys really talk a lot about everything all the time. It's so amazing. I don't know if you noticed that about yourself, but
I don't.
You guys, you do. You're really closely connected.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about the experience from the inside.
He's a good one. He's a keeper for sure. We met freshman year, and I don't really even remember meeting. He was friends with my ex-boyfriend from high school. We were still friends, my ex-boyfriend and I. And I went to visit him in the dorms once and apparently met Jay. I don't recall that. Jay makes fun of me for not remembering. He's like, you don't even remember me. And then a couple of years later, they roomed together, Jay and my former boyfriend. And we started hanging out. My roommates and his roommates would all hang out and do stuff. So I got to know him fairly well. And then after probably about a year or two of just being friends, somebody told me he liked me. And I can't remember who it was, but I was like, okay. And then he asked me out, and I will never forget, one of my roommates at the time was just like, oh, that's nice of you to go out with him. And I just remember thinking, what do you mean? He's a great guy. Okay, whatever. You don't have to see it. I see it. And so we started dating. It was interesting because I remember at the time I hadn't been in a serious relationship for quite a while. And I remember kind of like negotiating with God. I was like, you know what? I feel like I'm ready. I feel like I know what I want now. I know who I am now. I feel like I'm ready to meet the guy. And interestingly, within a couple of weeks, I had 3 different guys show up in my life that I went out on dates with. And it was super easy for me to be like, nope, yes. You know, I just knew. It almost felt like a test. Like, do you really think you know? And I did.
You did?
I did. And so Jay and I started dating, and I was coming at it from that mindset. He's going to be my person. We're going to ride off into the sunset together. And he's like, whoa, we just started dating.
Slow your roll.
Exactly. Poor guy. And so I think we dated for, probably 2 months, maybe 3. And it was too much. Like, I was too much. And in hindsight, I was too much. And he was just like, I can't do this, and broke up with him. I was like, okay, shattered my world because like I thought I knew what I knew. Mm-hmm. And then if that wasn't right, like how do I even know anything anymore? And so I was just so confused. And we were broken up for about 2 weeks. And then finally I was just like, this is ridiculous. We had been friends for years. We would all get together and do stuff. And now it was feeling awkward and weird. So I just called him and I say, look, you know what? We tried. It's fine. It's fine that it didn't work. Things don't need to be weird. We can just go to parties and be there and just be friends like we were before. It doesn't have to be a huge awkward thing. And he's like, okay, yeah, that's cool. Thanks. So we get off the phone and apparently that shifted something for him.
You weren't crazy psycho.
Right. Right. I was pretty rational. And so he had second thoughts. About a week or so later, talked to me and we started dating again. I was much more chill. I'm like, he doesn't have to know right now. I know. I can know for the both of us. He'll figure it out eventually. And he did.
That's hilarious. How did he propose?
Oh my gosh. We do not have a proposal story.
Okay.
Yeah. So here's what our proposal story is. I was in the Manhattan apartment during our IO program. I lived in a little apartment in Manhattan for the first year. The washer and dryer were in the kitchen. It was a small little apartment. And I was just sitting on the washer and we were just chatting about something. I don't even know who said it, but it was probably me. It said something like, so what are you doing here? Like, what's the status of our relationship? And I'm like, are we going to get married at some point? And he goes, yeah. He's like, will you marry me? And I'm like, yeah. And that was no cool, romantic.
That's cool. It's cool and romantic. It's low-key cool and romantic.
Yeah, it was very low-key. But yeah. So then we went and ring shopped and started the process of planning a wedding for 2 years later.
What do you think it would have been like if you would have done a counseling program first?
I think about that sometimes because I look at these younger women that are going through the program, or guys too, and think, man, if I had done this first, how much more would I know about this? How much better would I be with my clients? But I also got to honor the journey and realize that there have been unique benefits that I have gotten and that my clients benefit from because of the journey I was on. So I try to keep it in check.
Do you think you just weren't ready at that time, or do you think it was pleasing your dad that kind of steered you in the wrong direction?
I think probably both. I didn't know myself well enough to know that it would be okay if I didn't please my parents. I felt like I was still in that younger kind of mindset of if my parents are happy that I'm doing something right. I don't think I would have been able to do it when I was younger because I think that would have been too hard. I wouldn't have been able to handle that. And so I think it took therapy, me having some time to figure my own stuff out, and the realization of my life is my life. I need to live it the way that I feel called to live it.
And I'm sure your dad was very proud of you.
I think so. My dad just recently passed, so I can't ask him that question. He was not a man of many words. My dad was kind of quiet, reserved. But my parents, both of them, had a heart for the disadvantaged and incorporated that to whatever elements they could in their professional lives. And I think my dad appreciated that about the work I'm doing. I could do a private practice and I could be making way more money than I'm making now. And this is where I'm at.
And your mom was a teacher.
My mom taught inner city school. I asked her once growing up why she didn't teach in the suburbs where we lived, why she drove downtown and taught. And she's like, those kids need me more. The kids out here get great teachers, but the kids in the city don't get great teachers. So I'm going to be a great teacher for them.
She had such a passion for her teaching.
She loved it. She loved it. She would bring food for breakfast for her students because she knew they didn't always get breakfast and they could learn better if they had food in their tummies and things like that. I remember one year she had a girl in her class named Sarah, but that girl's name was spelled without the H. And my mom would leave me notes without the H. And I'm like, girl, I am your daughter. So yeah, they sometimes got the best.
I've talked to other teachers that sometimes feel bad for their children, and their children feel bad for themselves because it's hard, especially when your child's the same age as the children you're teaching, because like all your bandwidth for that gets sucked up.
For sure. Yeah. I'm also very proud of her. She really poured all of who she was into her teaching, which was interesting because a part of my decision to stay home when our kids were young was because of that. Because I kind of operate that way too. I pour everything I have into my work. I knew if I did that when my kids were young, I wouldn't have enough for them. And so stepping out of work for a while gave me those years of when they were really little to be able to have the bandwidth just pour into them.
I hope they're grateful. They probably don't realize how lucky they are yet, but
Yeah,
they will.
They would argue with you, but yeah. My kids are, especially my youngest, very frank and lets me know how things are. And so it's okay.
It often feels like you want the opposite of what you have.
True.
There's no perfect way to do it.
No.
You are such an inspiration. You've been such a great friend. The fact that we've remained friends all these years.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I told you recently, I was thinking back to when we first met and became friends. And we went to some gathering that we brought food for. You were complimenting me on the food I brought. I have no idea what it was. And I was like, oh, yeah, I can totally give you the recipe. And you're like, oh, that would be great. And so then the next time we saw each other, I gave you the recipe. And you said to me, wow, thanks for doing that. A lot of people say that, but not a lot of people follow through. And that to me, I was like, oh, I want to keep this girl in my life. I really appreciated being seen by you and that you weren't afraid to just say the thing.
Yeah.
And so I'm equally impressed with you. And you're just doing so many amazing things, and your courage in doing that and in trusting and investing in you is beautiful.
Well, I'm inspired by you to take this big pivot and a big leap. I'm like, I can do this. You're such a great cheerleader, and you always have been. I have a therapist. Everyone met her last week.
Yes.
But Sarah's also kind of a therapist. There's many phone conversations where I'm like, send me the bill. Having you in my life has been such a touchstone of knowing I have someone who's going to get it, not judge, be supportive, show up. When I was pregnant with Luke, it was a very hard pregnancy. Oh gosh, I'm going to cry. It was such a hard pregnancy. And you said, I want to come and support you, and I can come before or after. And I really wanted your visit to be about me. So I said before, and you came, and that time was so hard. The end was so hard. And it was just so lovely having you here supporting me. You're a good one too.
Oh, same.
I love you.
I love you too.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening to this conversation with Sarah. What stayed with me was how much courage it takes to keep becoming yourself, to admit when something no longer fits, to pivot, to start over, to choose a different path, even after years invested in another one. I think so many of us quietly wrestle with with questions like, am I living the life I actually want, or the life I thought I was supposed to want? What parts of me have I outgrown? What would I choose if fear, expectations, or other people's opinions were not driving the decision? And maybe the biggest question, is it too late to change? Sarah's story reminds us that it is not. Sometimes the path only makes sense in hindsight. Sometimes every chapter, even the ones that felt wrong, were shaping you into the person who could finally step into the right life. So maybe this episode is an invitation to get curious about yourself again. What still feels true? What no longer does? And what might happen if you trusted yourself enough to keep digging? If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who might need it. Thanks for listening.